Good morning, friends. Welcome back to my garden. Welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. If you're new here, my name's Jennifer, and today we're going to be taking a tour of my vegetable garden. Now today is July 4th, so if you're in America, happy Independence Day. Even though this won't air on July 4th, you won't see it for most likely for a couple days after that. But I hope you had a great day. So I'm just going to take you on a little walk around my garden. We're going to talk about how the plants are doing. I'm going to show you what's doing well, what's not doing so well. So I hope you'll join me on this beautiful morning. So as you can see, my pole beans are nicely climbing these trellises here. Over here, these haven't done as well. Some of those got a late start germinating, so I've replanted some seeds. I'm not sure what the difference is between the ones over here and the type over here. I'm not sure, but either way, these are thriving and looking beautiful. As you can see, they're starting to get some flowers there, so we should have some pole beans really soon. Back here, I've got a couple more varieties of pole beans. These over here, you can see these are a little bit slower growing. These are rattlesnake pole beans, and these take a little bit longer to reach maturity, but they're still doing really well. These are the same variety that's not doing as well on the other trellis, so I'm not sure what the difference is. You can see the rattlesnake beans have a purple flower, where the other ones have kind of a creamy yellow flower. But either way, they're making good progress. These over here are my purple pole beans. This variety is called Carmenat. You can see these have a beautiful deep purple flower. Those are looking really nice. So it shouldn't be too long till these trellises are covered. This variety, the first one we looked at, is called Vortex. This is a solid green bean, and you can see, as I mentioned, it's got those creamy yellow flowers. These are doing really well. They're almost to the top of the trellis there. Now in this trellis here, we have cucumbers. You can see that my cucumber plants are pretty small. If you've been around for a while, you know that something was eating all my cucumber seedlings that I direct seeded out here. Basically, as soon as they sprouted, something would nip the tops off all of them. So I finally started some transplants outside on my deck. I've got them transplanted out here, and they're looking good, although they are behind where they would be if they had just survived from the beginning. Got some more on this side here. So hopefully it won't be too long before we are starting to harvest some cucumbers. Through here, you can see I have some zucchinis growing. There's a couple zucchini plants over here. They're starting to flower, so we should get some fruit really soon. These are male flowers here. I'm going to show you how to tell the difference. So a lot of garden plants that we're familiar with growing, for example, tomatoes, peppers, peas, beans, plants like that, have all the male and female parts of the flower contained within the same flower. Zucchinis and squashes are a little bit different. So are cucumbers and melons. Those have separate male and female flowers, and in order to get fruit, you're going to need to have a male flower and a female flower blooming at the same time, and then have a pollinator bring the pollen from the male flower to the female flower. So for the most part, with those types of plants, the male flowers are going to bloom for a little while before you get any female flowers. The idea is that the plant is trying to get pollinators used to coming to the plant, to give the pollinators a little bit of time to find that plant, so that when the female flowers are blooming also, they'll already be in the habit of traveling there, and then those female flowers can get pollinated. So right now, I think we only have male flowers blooming. I'm going to show you what those look like and show you how to tell the difference between a male flower and a female flower on a zucchini plant. Now down here in this zucchini, you can see these big flowers blooming here. These are male flowers. And you can tell because, let me try to get the camera in here behind this trellis. See, they're on a long skinny stem there. The male flowers are kind of held away from the plant a little bit on a long skinny stem like that. So if you can see back there, that flower, that's just a bud right now. It's not flowering yet, and it's not going to be flowering for a little bit. There's actually a couple of them back there. They have what looks like a really tiny zucchini at the base of the flower. See, it's kind of a thicker stalk as opposed to this long skinny one. Those are female flowers. The female flowers will basically have a miniature version of the fruit at the base of the flower. And as long as that gets pollinated, it will develop into a full-size fruit. So in a few days, those will be blooming. And we're going to have to make sure that we have pollinators visiting this plant at that time. Now, if you don't have a lot of pollinators in your garden, you can hand pollinate. Basically, when you see the male flower open, you're going to have to do this first thing in the morning because they close by around the middle of the day. But if you go out there first thing in the morning, you see the male and female flower open at the same time. You can use something like a Q-tip or a tiny paintbrush to kind of gather pollen from the male flower. And then you want to put it onto the center part of the female flower. Once we have some female flowers open and blooming, I will show you what that looks like. But basically, it's much easier if the pollinators do it for you. And so it's best to try to attract pollinators to your garden. But just know that if for some reason your plants are not getting pollinated, if you don't have pollinators, it is possible to pollinate the flowers yourself. I'll try to do a quick video about that once I have some female flowers blooming and show you what I do just to be safe in case the pollinators don't seem to be doing their job one year. Now, one more thing I want to show you before we move on from the zucchini. Do you see this kind of silvery pattern on the leaf, sort of silvery veining? Now, a lot of people see this appear on their zucchini leaves and think that they have powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is definitely a concern when it comes to zucchini, but when you see this silvery pattern and it's just kind of following the veins in your leaves, it looks like a deliberate pattern. That is not usually powdery mildew. That is just some natural variation on the color of the leaves. You can see back here, this one has it too. Now, at some point in the season, I probably will get powdery mildew because that happens to most of my zucchini at some point. And I'll show you the difference when that happens. But powdery mildew is just kind of scattered across the entire leaf. There's no deliberate pattern to it. Sometimes it covers part of the leaf or the entire leaf. But either way, if you see this silvery pattern, as long as it's kind of subtle and following the veins of your leaves, don't be alarmed like that because it's probably natural. Now, as we continue past the zucchinis here, you can see that I have some really pretty beans starting up. These are red swan beans, and look how deep purpley red they are. Those are beautiful. So I'm really excited to try these. This is a new variety to me this year. Now, you can see I have these growing on a pole. These are supposed to be bush beans, but sometimes bush beans just get a little ambitious. You can see even back there in the tomato trellis. I have one up there climbing the trellis. So these beans were spreading out into the walkway, and I was afraid that they were going to get trampled. You can see some of them are still even trying to spread into the walkway. So I gave them some poles to climb up. They seem much happier now. So hopefully that will keep them safe from trampling. But you can see, and why are tiny beans so cute? It's like the baby version of anything is just automatically cute, right? So these little tiny beans. But these have really pretty flowers. They're kind of pink and white. So you can see all the different bean varieties I have in my garden look actually very different from each other. Back here are my other bush bean varieties, which are doing okay, although they kind of pale in comparison to those beautiful red swan beans. These beans are much more well-behaved and small. I think that these are my yellow beans, so I'm assuming that they will turn yellow as they get a little more mature. We'll find out as we go. And these, I believe, are my provider green beans. So these aren't doing as well, but I think that they'll catch up okay. So we'll keep an eye on these and see how they do throughout the season. So over here on this side of the trellis, I've got a few tomato plants. You can see that they're having lots of blooms. Come on, focus, focus. Doesn't want to focus on those. But you can see there's lots of blooms, tiny tomatoes starting. So we should have a pretty good harvest pretty soon. Now you can see over here, this is part of that bean plant, kind of came around the trellis and is grabbing onto the tomatoes. Have a few other bush beans over here. I can't remember for sure what variety these are, but the fact that they're trying to climb makes me think that they might be the red swan again. So we should have some good bush beans. Got a little cosmos here that hasn't started to bloom yet. Now over here on my tomato, you can see what looks like the very beginnings of disease. Now, I've taken a lot of steps to try to prevent disease. I outlined everything I did in a how to grow tomatoes video, which I'll link in the description. Despite that though, tomatoes in my area do really seem to get disease every year. And the idea is just to keep them healthy as long as possible so that you can get as much harvest as possible. Over here, I see a little sucker that I'm gonna pinch out. I'm gonna take that guy out of there because as you can see, I haven't been as diligent with my tomato plants as I should be, and they are, sorry about that, my camera is not wanting to focus today. So they are growing a little bit out of control. They're almost to the top of the trellis. But hopefully that means lots of good fruit for us. So after I finish filming this, I'm going to come out along all my tomato plants and clip off some more bottom leaves to try to prevent disease from spreading at all, which is pretty much all that you can really do when it comes to tomatoes. Now through here, look at these. These are beautiful. These are black strawberry tomatoes, and I have yet to get a ripe one of these. These are cherry tomatoes, but they're very generously sized for cherry tomatoes. So see all this kind of, they call them black tomatoes. Black tomatoes are really a very deep purple, but it's only on the skin. Once you bite into the tomato or slice into it, it's going to be, in most cases, red inside, depending on the tomato. This one will be red inside. And this is from an antioxidant that is in the skin called anthocyanins. It's the same antioxidant that makes blueberries that blue color. As you can see, these tomatoes have a really high concentration of it. They're very healthy for you. And this is produced by exposure to sunlight. So the more sun that your tomatoes are exposed to, the darker they'll be. You can see along the base where the sun doesn't reach them, they're green down there. So if you're growing a variety of blue or black tomato, you're going to determine ripeness based on looking at the bottom of the fruit, because that is the part that will change to its eventual ripe color. Anything that's exposed to the sun will be this beautiful deep purple black color. Here's one more little shot of these red swan beans growing through the trellis over here. Now over here, I have another tomato trellis, which you can see is quickly turning into a jungle. Before we really get to the, oh, see that one has a little bit of disease back there too. So that's another little bit of leaves that we're going to have to clip off. But before we really get into the tomatoes, you'll see I have a lettuce here that's really going to seed. So if you've never had lettuce grow to the point of seed, you know that in the beginning it's a little rosette. And then at some point it's going to make this center stalk and get extremely tall. So, and then when it gets really tall, it's going to get these little yellow flowers. So I'm going to be saving seeds from this lettuce plant for a couple of reasons. One is just that I really liked this plant. It was very delicious. It stayed nice and tender and crisp for a while. The other reason is that this plant, and you'll see also this one back here that's starting to go to seed. This one doesn't have flowers yet, but it's starting, it's bolted. So these lettuce plants that I have here both survived the winter last year. I had them covered, I had them in a low hoop tunnel covered with clear plastic, which definitely helped protect them from snow and wind and exposure. But despite that, it still did get extremely cold. And so for those plants to have survived, they showed that they had real cold hardiness. They're very tough in cold conditions. And so I'm going to do what is called selecting for certain characteristics. I'm trying to select for lettuces that are cold hardy. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose your cold hardiest plants, the ones that survived through the worst conditions, the ones that are the best survivors, and you're going to save seeds from those plants. And then when you grow those seeds next year, you should have a good genetic base that you're starting with to have plants that are more likely to survive cold. And then again, you do the same thing. From those plants, you save the ones that show the most cold hardiness, and eventually you can develop, you can kind of customize your plant by selecting for the best genetics, depending on what you're looking for. Plant breeders do this all the time. This is how they develop new varieties. Now, I'm not trying to develop a new variety. I'm actually not even 100% sure what this lettuce is because it came from a mix. But because I liked it and because it showed that it can survive my cold Connecticut winters, that is a plant that I want to keep growing in my garden. You could do the same thing with heat resistance. If you plant all your lettuces and then find the one that takes the longest to bolt in the summer, the one that stays sweet and tender the longest throughout the summer heat, save seeds from that plant and continue on that way throughout the generations. And eventually you'll develop a plant that is best suited for your summer growing conditions. You could do it with any characteristic that you like. There's a plant that's a certain color, there's a plant that's a certain size, a certain growing habit. You want to save seeds of the plants that do the best for you. So, all that being said, I did not mean to go into that big lecture about plant genetics. The basic point is save seeds from plants that you like. Save seeds from plants that do well for you. Now this plant here, you can see the flowers are open. I'm not bothering to worry about preventing cross-pollination. The main reason for that in this case is that this is my only lettuce plant that is blooming in this part of the garden. I know I have this one not too far behind, but that doesn't have any flowers that have opened yet. So that means that all of the flowers that have opened on this lettuce plant are going to be pure. They're not going to be cross-pollinated. They're going to be pollinated by the plant itself. Okay, so after all that talk about lettuce, we're going to move on and look at the tomatoes here. You can see they're looking nice and healthy. They're about up to the top of the trellis in some cases. We have lots of flowers. Now here in Connecticut, we're behind a lot of people in the south and won't be having ripe fruit for a little while. This is a Black Beauty here. You can see this has the same purpling that my black strawberry had. And over here, there's another one. I'm hoping that these will get a little bit darker and the purpling will be more pronounced, which I think it will be as these plants grow. So through here, you can see I have a nice healthy basil plant here. Be time to harvest a little more from that. And back here, see these tomatoes? This is my Cherokee purple plant, and this is my favorite big slicer tomato. So I can't wait for these to ripen for me. Okay, so around here is the back of that same tomato bed we were just looking at. Here's a beautiful nasturtium blooming. I love these cherry pink ones. They're so pretty. Little spicy bush basil there, just a little guy. Now here I've got some cherry tomatoes looking lovely. Here's some more lettuce. This is the same story as the other lettuce. This is also all lettuce that survived the winter. These are going to seed as well. Because they're not interfering with my tomatoes, I'm just going to let these go. I'm going to save seeds from them. Got some more cherry tomatoes here, and this one escaped from the cage. I'm going to see if I can get that in the cage without breaking it. Success. Got a nice big cluster of cherry tomatoes here. I'm just starting to get some ripe cherry tomatoes. I haven't had very many yet. And no ripe slicer tomatoes yet. So you can see I've got more bush beans here. Trying to go into the walkway again. I'm guessing this is the red swan again. Over here, I've got some peppers. These are looking okay, but I'm going to take you up on my deck later and I'm going to show you the pepper plants that I have growing on my deck. And there's a big difference. There's a reason I normally grow my pepper plants in pots on the deck. So if you're short on space and you don't have space for an in-ground garden, peppers are an excellent plant to grow in containers. And some more red swan bush beans through here. Now my lettuces, for the most part, are pretty much done. I have a few that I'm letting go because I'm saving seeds from them. But for the most part, these are going to get ripped out. I'll probably put some bush beans in here for the moment because they're a really quick growing crop. And I have some more lettuces started inside that I'm going to bring out once they're big enough. Now here, you can see my scallions went to seed. If you kind of rub the seed head, see I got a couple seeds there. Let's see if we can get a few more. So sometimes I'll just pluck off this whole seed head. This one looks like it was probably only half ready. I didn't really mean to pluck this off. But once it's completely dry, you can pluck off the whole seed head, bring it inside, and put it in a bag, and it will kind of release its seeds gradually. Some of these scallion seeds I'm just going to scatter directly in the garden to increase the size of my scallion patch. I'll probably bring some of them inside in case there's some that I want to plant in a different spot or share with friends. So over here is my brassica bed. This has kale, cabbage, cauliflower. You can see that it is still abundantly producing. Down in here, I've got a really nice Savoy cabbage, just starting to head up. That doesn't feel very solid yet, so that's got a ways to go. I've definitely got to harvest some of these kales because they're growing out of control. So I think what I'm going to do, I think we'll together harvest some kale and I'll show you how I make kale powder, and we may freeze some of this kale for winter soup as well. Now down here, I harvested my first cauliflower the other day. I'm going to be posting a video really soon about how I cooked that. It was delicious, and I kind of wish I'd done a garden tour before I harvested it, just so you could see how beautiful it was. I have a few more cauliflowers back here. This one's a pretty good size. It's not quite as beautiful though. It looks like something's been nipping at it a little bit, but that's still going to be delicious. This one's ready to harvest, so I need to go ahead and do that. Through here, this cauliflower doesn't look very good. I think something got to it. You can see it's got some kind of chewed on leaves there. Not sure what happened with that one. In here, I've got a couple other little ones that are just kind of, I don't know if I can even see this one. Got a couple other little ones that are, you can see it down there a little bit. That one's just not really close to ready yet, needs a little more time. Okay, so I have a cabbage question, and I'm hoping that someone will be able to help me out. These cabbages here, these are early Jersey Wakefield. They're kind of like a cone-shaped cabbage. This one feels like it's starting to get a little bit solid. But I want to know, I've never grown cabbage before. It's July, it's starting to get pretty hot here. How do you know when your cabbage is getting ready to bolt? Because this is very small right now, so I don't think it's ready to harvest. But I don't want it to get too hot and for my cabbages to just bolt without me getting anything out of them. So if anyone has any tips on how to tell when it's just about to be too late to harvest your cabbage, let me know so I can harvest mine before that point. You can see more kale. Got some cauliflower in here. Let's see. Oh, this one's starting to get ahead. That's looking good in there. Tiny head here too. I'm going to need to blanch this cauliflower, which means to kind of wrap the leaves over it like this. It's a little tricky to do with one hand, but you want to kind of wrap them in place. You can tie them in place if you need to. You want to protect the cauliflower head from sun exposure because that will diminish the quality of the cauliflower. I don't think I can do this very well with one hand. I'm going to have to come out and finish doing this when I'm done filming the video. So I want to show you an update on my cabbages that were being eaten. We saw those in the last garden tour. Now I came out and sprayed them with BT. This one seems to have recovered really well. This one wasn't as far gone as the other. You can see the outer leaves are pretty well nibbled. They were being eaten by cabbage worms, these little green and black caterpillars that kind of hang out in the cabbage and eat it. Anyway, I sprayed it with BT. You can see this one's making a nice recovery. This one here was a little farther gone, so it looks like it might actually be doing okay. I'm not as hopeful for this one, but we'll see what happens, and worst case scenario, it'll be a delicious snack for my chickens. So you can see I have a few bush beans in here. This variety is called Tanya's Pink Pod. This is kind of a rarer bush bean variety. It's hard to find seeds for them. I grew them last year and I loved them. They were beautiful and prolific and delicious. And I only had a few seeds left. So I decided that what I was going to do this year, I was going to use those few seeds just to grow myself some more seed stock. So I don't plan to harvest off these beans this year. I'm growing them to save seeds. So hopefully that will be successful and we'll get a good crop of seeds to grow these beans again next year. Over here I have a couple more tomato plants. Looks like something's been nibbling at them. I've got a few little holes in the plant. I don't think it's anything that's doing serious damage, so I'm not going to probably take any sort of pest control measures unless it seems to be really increasing in damage. But you can see here, this is a sauce tomato. Starting to get a few tomatoes. This is a determinate tomato, so that should ripen all its tomatoes at once. You can see this one has some little suckers here. I'm not going to take those off of this plant because this is a determinate plant. If you take the suckers off of your determinate plant, you're going to be lowering your harvest substantially. So this cherry tomato plant that I have here is called a Sun Gold Select. Now my all-time favorite cherry tomato is Sun Gold. It's delicious. They're kind of small, orangey, golden tomatoes that are just a burst of amazing deliciousness. I love them so much. But I am trying to grow more open pollinated varieties. That's one of the steps that I'm taking to be a little bit more self-sustainable. There's nothing wrong with hybrids, but because I'm trying to get into seed saving a little bit more, if you want to save seeds that are going to grow true to type and be guaranteed to be like the parent plant, you want open pollinated varieties or heirloom varieties. So Sun Gold is a hybrid, which means that if I save seeds from it, I have no idea what I'm going to get. So somebody took some time and developed from the Sun Gold plant an open pollinated variety of Sun Gold, which is what this is. This is Sun Gold Select. Now I have not harvested any fruit from this plant yet, so I don't know exactly how it compares to Sun Gold. I'm hoping that it will compare favorably and be just as delicious. But my entire reason for growing this plant is so that I can have an open pollinated variety of Sun Gold. If for whatever reason, you know, during COVID, gardening became so much more popular and seed companies kind of got overrun. The demand on seed companies was so increased that they couldn't really keep up with it. And so there was kind of a seed shortage. And so just with the way the world is changing so much, I just really like to know that I can have that guarantee of having my favorite variety every year. If nothing else, it's going to save me a few dollars buying seeds every year. So what I want to do, because I have so many tomato varieties in my garden and so many of them are blooming at the same time, what I want to do is I want to take this little gauze baggie here. I'm going to use this to isolate some of these blooms on this Sun Gold Select plant to make sure that it only gets pollinated by itself and not pollinated by another tomato variety. That's going to prevent an accidental cross-pollination, which can be fun. Cross-pollination can be fun. Sometimes you end up with some really good varieties that way. But in this specific case, I want to save seeds and know what I'm getting. So what I am going to need to do is find a cluster of buds that have not opened yet, because once they've opened, they can be cross-pollinated. So I'm going to find a cluster that has not opened yet. I'm going to put this little baggie on them so that no other pollen from any other plant can get to them. Now, tomatoes are a great plant to do this with because everything that is needed to pollinate that tomato flower is contained within the single flower. They don't need to be pollinated by any other flowers. They also pollinate very easily. So all I really need to do is once I have some blooms bagged, I really just need to come out and kind of tap on them every day, maybe blow on them a little bit just to make sure that the pollen moves throughout the flower. And that should be enough to ensure pollination of my plant. So I'm going to look for an unopened bud cluster, and I'm just going to show you how I put this bag on. So see this little bud cluster here? I know it might be a little bit hard to see from where you are, but this has several buds that are not open. So we're just going to slip this bag very carefully over the bud cluster. Easier said than done, of course, because I don't want to damage my plant. And then just pull the drawstring nice and gently. Once these are fully pollinated, once the flowers have fallen off and there's tiny fruits, I'm going to remove this bag so that they can develop fully. And I'm just going to tie maybe a little string or a marker or something onto this cluster here so I know that this is the one that we isolated. Look, do you see it? A couple sun sugar tomatoes just starting to ripen. This is just something that fell off a tree. Let's take that off our tomatoes. So you can see this plant, like some of the others, is just starting to get a little bit of disease. So I'm going to have to come out and prune those affected leaves off. But the plant in general looks very healthy. And look, do you see what I see back there? Little bits of red. Let's go take a closer look. All right, so it's hard to get a good look with all the foliage, but you can see we have a couple ripening red tomatoes in there. Those are Maxwell cherry, and those should be delicious as well. So here's my garlic patch. You can see this garlic is kind of tired and done. This is almost ready to harvest. So you can see here, I told you that I would leave a couple garlic scapes so you could see what happens as they mature. I mean, this one, can't even see the base of it. This is really tall. And you can tell it feels kind of tough now. The flower part is getting quite a bit bigger. Now they say when garlic is ready to harvest that this is going to stand straight up, and that will let you know that it's ready. So maybe we'll give that a try. Either way, I wanted to show you what happens if you don't harvest the scapes. So this garlic head here that the scape is coming from may end up being a little bit smaller than the others, but I think it's worth it for the experiment. Now you can see behind the garlic, my peas are kind of on the way out. Let me show you over here too. So yeah, my peas are it's getting too hot for them and they're kind of winding down now. But we had a lot of delicious harvest from them while they lasted. Now I will say, these spring blush snap peas, while they were beautiful, I don't think I'm going to grow them again. I much prefer the super sugar snap. They're sweeter, they stay tender longer. These spring blush snap peas really have to be harvested very young to be tender and sweet, where the super sugar snap peas, which I don't know if you can even see them, they're back there behind my tomatoes over there. And those actually look like they have a little bit more life in them, more than the spring blush do. Those stay tender longer. You can eat them even when they're nice and fat. Okay, so back to the garlic. Here's another angle of my garlic patch. You can see it looks like it's kind of starting to die down. Now, generally you want to harvest garlic once the three bottom leaves have kind of dried up and shriveled. You can see this one's definitely done that. This one's well on its way. This one, the third leaf here, you can see it is definitely starting to dry up. So it's not going to be too much longer, maybe another week or so, before this garlic is ready to harvest. Now, all of these stems laying down, that's another sign that it's getting close. That's partly because we had some stormy weather that kind of flattened it a little bit, but also because it's getting really close. So you can see here, this leaf is gone, this leaf's gone, this leaf is almost gone. So it's not going to be too long at all before these are ready to harvest. And once we harvest this garlic, we have a really exciting experiment that we're going to be doing in this bed here. I am going to be experimenting with growing a second crop of tomatoes for fall, just for preservation. We'll talk more about that in a later video. Okay, so back here in the corner, this spot's a little bit shadier than the rest of my garden. We have kind of my random catch-all bed. I've got a lot of parsley here, which is looking really good. And tell me what you think. I have this plant here. Is this a ground cherry or is this a wild nightshade? Let me see if I can get a close-up of the flowers for you. So you can see the flowers in here. They kind of have already bloomed. Let's see. There's one that's blooming there. So I started some ground cherries inside and none of them germinated. So I scattered a few seeds outside to see what would happen. And I'm wondering if this is one of them. I'm not sure. Nothing came up for a long time after I scattered seed, and so I wasn't sure. But then this came up and I was like, I don't know if this is a weed or ground cherry. I've never grown them before. So if anyone can let me know. The leaves are kind of fuzzy feeling. Not quite as fuzzy as, say, a mullein or a lamb's ear, but they're definitely kind of fuzzy. So if anyone can let me know, is this a ground cherry or is this a wild nightshade that I should be pulling out? Come on, focus on that little flower there. Let me see. All right, there's the flower. So let me know what you guys think. So over here in this bed, I don't have anything else that's doing incredibly well. I think the lack of sun is not ideal for this. I have a few chamomile flowers, which I need to come out and harvest. But, I mean, I only have a few. It's going to be enough for maybe 1 cup of tea. I have a few little calendula flowers here just starting to bloom. I like to pick these when they first bloom and dry them on my countertop. And then they're great for infusing into oil to make a nice herbal oil or herbal salve. So when you pick calendula flowers, you can feel they're kind of sticky. That's the resin, and that's what has all the medicinal properties that calendula has. All right, over here in this bed, we have some more peppers and some more beans mixed in. I like to kind of put bush beans wherever because they make a good companion plant. Now, I was going to say they're nice and small and can fit anywhere, but that is usually the case. That is not the case with a lot of my beans this year. But this one I think is a red swan again. It's getting some nice flowers. So in here we've got some peppers. Some peppers are starting to bloom. I have a mix of hot peppers and sweet peppers in here. And they're doing okay. Peppers on my deck have always done so much better for me. Now you can see back here, this is straw that I mulched with not hay, but I guess it did have some seeds in it because they're sprouting in my bed. So I'm gonna have to go through and weed those out. Now my kale that we let go to seed, kind of crazy. I mean, it's crazy how prolific kale can be. Like, look at all these. Actually, it looks like this one, I even missed this one. This one already dried out and spread its seeds. So I've got to keep an eye on these. They should be, let's pick this one and take a look at it. Those seeds are still green. They're not ready yet. But it shouldn't be too long before some of these other kale seeds are ready and we can harvest them. You can see I have some back here that I bagged the same way I did with the tomatoes to prevent cross-pollination. So I'm definitely going to save these. And then I'll probably save some of these seeds that are likely a mix as well. Now back here, we've got some more peppers. And here is my beautiful variegated shishito plant. It's just so pretty. Now you can see even this one pepper is variegated. This is just such an interesting plant. This plant has been variegated from the very day that it sprouted. And we kind of talked about saving seeds a little bit before. I'm going to be saving seeds from this plant to try to select, as we talked about before, to try to select for the variegated gene. And hopefully we can work on developing a shishito pepper that is fully variegated, because that would just be an amazing thing that I think the world really needs, right? But this has lots of peppers on it. They're kind of small right now, but making some good progress. So I can't wait to harvest those. So in the comments, let me know your favorite ways to use shishito peppers. I haven't grown them before. They've come very highly recommended, and so I'm really looking forward to trying them. But I have, I think, 6 plants of them. So hopefully, if everything goes well and our plants stay healthy, we should get a good harvest. So let me know your recipes, your favorite ways to use them, and I'll give some of them a try. So we're just gonna take a quick look at the broccoli bed. Most of my broccoli big heads have been harvested already. You can see there's still a few little ones left. Let's see over here, this one's a little smaller, but this one's not quite ready yet. That one has a few more days and will hopefully get a little bit bigger. Now you can see my broccoli is making side shoots. So once you harvest the main head of broccoli, it's going to make a bunch of little side shoots for you to also harvest. We harvested this broccoli together. Actually, I haven't posted that video yet, so you haven't seen it yet. But we harvested some broccoli and cauliflower together and then made a delicious side dish with them just a couple days ago. And this is starting to make a side shoot already. So once you harvest your main heads of broccoli, most varieties will make side shoots. So you don't want to pull the plant once you harvest it. You want to give your plant a little dose of fertilizer and let it keep going so it makes more side shoots. So we've got lots of those in here. Should be able to harvest enough for about a side dish of broccoli every couple days or so. Just wanted to really quickly show you some of our milkweed plants. You can see the bumblebees are really enjoying these, hard at work. We've got a few milkweed plants here. I did not plant these just grew up wild. We leave them because this is the food for the monarch butterfly caterpillar. And we don't get monarchs every year, but some years we do, and it's always really fun to see. As you can see, the bumblebees really love them too. Raspberries are looking delicious. You can see we're starting to get some fruit that's almost ripe. Down here, there's another one. They always kind of trickle in at first, and it feels like everyone kind of fights over the first couple raspberries. But once those first few come in, it's not going to be very long till we have more raspberries than we can really eat. I see another one here. This one is almost ripe. Probably tomorrow that one will be perfect. Over here on the side of the raspberries, this isn't really all that beautiful, but I'm going to show you anyway. I have my potatoes. These are grocery store potatoes that we planted together. I'm going to link that video in the video description because I definitely think it's worth checking out if you missed it. I explain in there all about why I'm growing grocery store potatoes this year. They have not started sprouting yet. You can see some weeds have started sprouting. I just planted these a few days ago, so I wouldn't really expect them to be sprouting yet. But some kind of animal was digging in them. So to keep that animal away, I just had some random scraps of hardware cloth that I put over it. I'm going to keep that here until the plants get established. And this isn't really a place that they're tempted to dig anymore. Back here behind my raspberry patch, I kind of last minute decided to put in an additional garden bed. This was a no-dig garden bed. So what I did here, you can see there's cardboard sticking out of the edges there. We covered this whole grass area with cardboard and then with a pretty thick layer of compost. Then I planted some seeds directly in it. Now I've got a couple little butternut squash seedlings on the end, beans coming up around these poles here. These had kind of a staggered germination, and so germination looks a little spotty right now. So I may replant some seeds, but we'll see what comes up. I've got sugar pie pumpkins here. I'm gonna have to thin one of these out. The packet said to plant them in a ring of 5 and then to thin to 3 plants. So I'm gonna have to pull, I had 4 come up, so I'm gonna have to pull one of those. Then over here, another bean teepee. You can see kind of the same thing, spotty germination, but I'm going to replant if I need to. I've got another little ring of sugar pie pumpkins, more bean teepees. This one just has a couple. Some of them are really small. I don't think they really show up on the video. Ones that kind of just came up. Now, one of the reasons that I decided kind of last minute to put this quick little no-dig garden bed in was because for some similar reasons that I mentioned in my potato video, the world is really uncertain right now. And the idea of having some more crops that store for a really long time, thus the butternut squash and the pumpkins that I'm growing here, just seemed like a good idea. Best case scenario, we don't really have anything to worry about, but it's going to save us some money on produce from the grocery store. And with food prices the way they are right now, saving a little bit of money sounds like a great idea. We just decided it was kind of a wise thing to be putting up a little bit more produce right now. So the butternut squash variety that I planted is a really quick days to maturity variety. It's the burpee butterbush. It's supposed to be a smaller space squash. It grows more like a bush plant, more like a zucchini than like a sprawling winter squash usually would. And those take 75 days to reach maturity, assuming ideal conditions. Now, with the daylight hours starting to shorten a little bit now, we're not really seeing the effect of that yet, but in another 2 months, we probably will be seeing that effect. It's probably going to take a little bit longer than 75 days for these to reach maturity, but I'm still pretty confident that I have plenty of time before my first frost to get some good butternut squashes off of these plants. Now, over here on the edge of my chicken yard, you'll see that I have some extra cucumbers growing that I did not have growing here last week. So this is my spot where I'm actually growing lemon balm, but I just planted these plants this year. They're pretty small, so they don't need all of this space yet. So I had some extra cucumber plants because of the saga of my cucumbers disappearing in my garden. I started some extra seedlings on my deck, and I didn't have space to plant them all in my garden. So I decided to add some over here to my lemon balm bed. Hopefully these will grow up the fence. Hopefully the chickens, as you can see over here, hopefully the chickens will not be nipping at them from inside the fence and stealing a bite. But even if they do, these are kind of an extra bonus crop that I wasn't planning on having. So we'll just see what happens with this. All right, let's head up to my deck and take a look at my container garden here. As you can see, I have an abundance of bush beans growing here. These, I believe, are the yellow bean varieties. We haven't gotten any flowers or beans from these yet, but I planted these a little bit later than the plants in my garden. You can see they've kind of overtaken the pineapple sage that I also have growing here, which just smells amazing. A few nasturtiums in here as companion plants. Down here, this is a small pot to be growing cucumbers in. I'm not really counting on a big harvest from these This was kind of a just try and see what happens type of experiment. So we'll just see if we get any cucumbers from these. I've planted basil in here, but it hasn't germinated yet. I just planted that like 2 days ago. Over here I have a few peppers. Now, if you'll compare these pepper plants to the ones in my garden, you'll see why I usually prefer to grow my peppers in pots. These pepper plants are huge and healthy looking. And look at these. These are probably the biggest cayenne peppers I've ever seen. Those are huge. But these plants are looking big and healthy. Over here I have a little sweet potato. Here I've got some onions that I decided to try on my deck. We'll see how they do. You'll notice I have some weeds growing in here. This weed is called lamb's quarter. This grows pretty much everywhere, at least in my area. If you're familiar with this weed, I definitely want to say make sure that you're sure of your identification before eating anything wild. But this weed is delicious and edible, kind of tastes like spinach, and makes a great treat for my chickens or my daughter's rabbit. So I kind of let these grow until they get to about this size, and then I pull them out and either eat them or give them to some of our animals. Down here, some more cucumbers growing in another small pot. We'll see what happens there. This is my Paul Robeson tomato. This is the one I think I showed you on the last garden tour. I hadn't transplanted it yet. This was a straggler that germinated later than all my other tomatoes. Look, it's starting to get a sucker there. We're just gonna pull that out. This germinated later than all my other tomatoes, so it didn't make it in time for planting in my garden. So we got a nice pot for this guy, and hopefully this will do well. I've started, I think this is a little nasturtium coming up and a basil. I put a few little companion plants around the edge that are just starting to come up. This pot I just planted with China Jade cucumbers. They have not germinated yet. I just planted that a couple days ago as well. In here, I've got some sweet potato plants. These are starting to get bigger and look really healthy. More lamb's quarter in here. Down here, my ginger, I don't know, I think it died. The leaves certainly died. I'm not sure what's going on with the root inside. I may have to take it out and find out what's going on with it at some point. I'm not sure. This pot is a little mini tomato jungle contained within a pot. Has 3 cherry tomato plants. I have not been doing any pruning or staking with these. So as you can see, they're definitely out of control. But they're making some delicious tomatoes for us. I assume they're delicious because I have yet to taste them, but they're certainly beautiful in the meantime. This is a black strawberry tomato plant. You saw the black strawberry tomatoes down here. This was a new introduction from Baker Creek this year. I've never seen the seeds anywhere else. They are, I think, are pretty rare. Now, if you look in here, you can see some little tiny tomatoes. I use that same seed saving technique that we talked about in the garden for those. So I'll hopefully save seeds for those this year. Down here, buried in this jungle, I have a couple little cucumber plants, which I don't even think I can really see. Over here, more peppers with some beans as companion plants. These are jalapenos that are looking big and healthy. I've got my purple ball basil in here. We've been harvesting from this quite a bit, and as you can see, it's recovering from harvesting quite nicely. And I've got some spicy bush basil here. These are really all doing very well, so I decided to try growing more basil on my deck. Got onions again over here. We'll see how those do. That's an experiment. This pot is empty as of the moment. I have some in this pot as well. I have some butternut squash seedlings that are going to be transplanted into these pots in the next couple days. Down here, I've started more basil, and you can see a little nasturtium has germinated. Over here is my roselle plant. I'll be growing this plant for tea. I've never grown this before, so that's new to me. Hopefully this will do well. And you can see I tossed some basil seeds in there as well. Tell me what you think in the comments. Does this look like alyssum to you? I'm going to keep an eye on it and see. Got a rosemary plant here. Here I started some more basil and some marigolds. Those are coming up. My son's clementine plant, looking beautiful as always. Down here, this is a Dr. Weish's, if I am pronouncing that right, which I probably am not. Dr. Wishy's tomato plant that we started from a tomato sucker. Out in the garden, I clipped a tomato sucker off of my full-size plant, rooted it in a cup of water. Now I've planted it in this pot, and there it goes. This is a small pot for it as well. I didn't have, you're seeing all my beautiful cobwebs. This is a really small pot for a tomato plant. I didn't have any large ones available at the moment, so I put it in here. And because it's kind of a bonus-free plant, I'm okay with just seeing what happens. So even though this is a vegetable garden tour, I couldn't not show you guys my beautiful blue hydrangeas. I look forward to these blooming every summer, and I just love how they change. They start off kind of white and green with a little bit of a blue tinge, kind of change to this as they get a little more blue, and eventually mature into this full-size blue flower head. They're so beautiful. Here you can see my double gold raspberry bushes. I love red raspberries, but I think these are the most delicious fruit that exists. They're so good. So good. So good. Just tastes like summer. So through here, you can see we have a handful of these ready. This is the first year that we're really getting a significant harvest off these plants. They're pretty low growing right now, but you can see back here, these are a type of raspberry that produces 2 harvests. Down here on the low growing part, these are the canes that grew last year and will produce a summer harvest. These tall canes here, these are new this year, and these should produce a second harvest for us in the fall. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's called the double gold raspberry because it's considered a golden raspberry, even though it's kind of a coral pink color, and double because you get 2 harvests from it. So it's a delicious bonus. So over here, this doesn't really look like much yet, just kind of a pile of wood chips. This is where I just planted wine-capped mushrooms. So I just planted wine-capped mushrooms there a couple days ago. I think you'll probably see this video before you see that one, but definitely check that video out because it's my first time planting wine-capped mushrooms and I'm really excited to grow them. So I hope you'll join me for that adventure. So thank you all for joining me in my garden this morning. I had such a great time walking through the garden and just showing you everything that I'm growing. I love to talk about the garden, and sometimes the people in my life don't always want to hear about it when I want to talk about it. So I really appreciate you all taking these garden walks with me and listening to me talk about these plants that I love so much. So leave a comment and let me know, what is your plant that you are most excited to grow this year? It can be an old favorite, something that you really love and just you look forward to every year. It could be something new that you're really excited to try for the first time. I think one of mine, I don't think I can narrow that down. I have a habit of asking questions that I can't really answer myself. But one thing that I'm really excited to try is the black strawberry tomato. I think that it sounds like an amazing, delicious tomato. I'm also really excited to try the shishito pepper. I have heard amazing things about that pepper, and so I'm really looking forward to trying it. So let me know what you're most excited to try this year. Let me know what's something new that you're trying this year. And I hope that you will join me again, probably in another couple weeks or so. I'm going to try to do a tour again at the end of July. So hopefully there'll be a lot of really exciting updates from this tour. So I hope that you'll join me again. And I hope that you're having an amazing day. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye. I'll see you next time.